Organizers today, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for coming down. I know it's a Saturday, and on a Saturday evening, most of us could be anywhere else except in the US. But you have taken the time and trouble to come here, and we are very grateful to be able to have you today for this event. We've organized this event at least twice in the last year. It was very successful. This event is actually a culmination of the weekly university programs that we conduct. And every week we try and touch on different topics of, if it goes on. Okay, is this better? Okay. So, what we try to do every week here on Thursdays is to try and discuss topics. No, actually this has too much feedback. I think this is better. This is alright. What we try to do every week, like I said, is to try and share with you all some very practical points from our spiritual and religious foundations. What is the point of speaking about spiritual life if it cannot apply to our daily life? That's the key. All of you who are gathered here may be interested in what happens to you after you die. But most of us are more interested in what happens while we are alive. So we want to try and present the Bhagavad Gita and our Vedic culture in such a way that it becomes practical. If you can somehow or another find that the presentation today and the entire program today becomes practical for you, if it makes you think about the purpose of life, if it makes you somehow or other become more interested in trying to change your consciousness, then maybe we would have achieved some form of objective. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm going to share with you whatever that has not been plucked from the air. Whatever that I'm going to share with you today is actually from our scriptures. It's the scriptures known as the Bhagavad Gita. It's from the scriptures known as the Bhagavad Purana. And you will find at the end of the presentation that the scriptures of the world do not differ very much. They do not differ very much. In fact, you find that the principles are all basically the same. Okay? Now, before I start, I want to ask a very quick question or two. How many of you are actually studying in the US? Okay, welcome to all of you. How many of you are members of the teaching faculty? Very nice. Thank you very much for coming. How many of you are visitors who have come through because of friends, families, and whoever else? Okay, that's very nice. So we have a motley crew here of many, many persons coming from all walks of life. That's nice. Okay, let us start. The topic today, ladies and gentlemen, is actually about this word known as temptation. And the topic that has been given to me is actually deceiving temptation. Can everyone see this clearly enough? You can, right? Okay. If you can't, it doesn't matter. You just have to hear. Now, temptations and deception. Why are we speaking about it today? Because the nature of temptation is something that we should understand. In the Bhagavad Gita, and this is in the 2nd chapter, 60th verse, Krishna very nicely tells to Arjuna that, Arjuna, please, you know one thing. The senses, they are very, very strong. Not only are they strong, but they are impetuous, which means they have a life of their own. Arjuna is told by Krishna that the senses are so strong that they can carry away the mind forcibly. And the mind of who? Every living entity. Anybody's mind can be distracted from a goal. Such is the power of the senses. Krishna also tells Arjuna that even a man of discrimination, a learned man, a man who believes he's in control of his life, he can also find it very difficult to control his mind. And I think Bhagavad Gita is not very far from the truth. If I ask all of you seated here today, just for 1 minute, can you all try very, very hard not to think about elephants? The first thing that comes to mind is the thought of an elephant. It's the nature of the mind. Whatever the mind is told not to do, very often the nature of it is to do exactly what it's told not to. In fact, the challenge normally in society is to go with the flow of actually telling the mind what to do. Because very often if you say, for example, I want to come and hear the lecture today, your mind may give you very favorable arguments why you should come. The fact that all of you are here is very encouraging. It means you have more control over your mind than most people because you have decided to follow what you decided. The mind and you are different. That is what the Gita says. But the Gita tells us that you are in good company if you were to suggest that the mind is very difficult. Because the Gita says so. The mind has this capacity. The mind has this temptation. It gives you the temptation to do one thing. It always tries very hard to distract you from your goal and objective. For example, we are all distracted by the children who are crying. Aren't we? You're all looking here at me, but your mind is telling you, wait a minute, they are right there and they are crying. So the mind will now tussle with you for the rest of our presentation to decide whether you want to hear them or you want to hear me. This is the nature of the mind. The nature of the mind, my God, they stop. What did I say? But children will be children. It's all right. It's all right for children to make noise. It's not all right for adults to make noise, but it's all right for children to make noise. If we tell the mind that and we say, let's stay focused, it will be very good. You know, once upon a time, not very long ago, 2-3 years ago, we used to have bhagavatam programs at one of the temples. We were at a very small spot, and just next to it, there would be other ceremonies and everything going. We would normally have our programs there because we would have to check with the priest to make sure no other functions were going on so we could hear Bhagavad Gita clearly. On that day, there happened to be a wedding, and the priest never told us about it. Imagine a full-fledged wedding going on and we are trying to hear Bhagavad Gita hardly 20 meters away. It's not going to happen. But on that day, all of us huddled very closely to the speaker. And I can guarantee you, the 20 or 30 of us who sat down that day to hear the Gita never heard it better. Because we told ourselves that we have many distractions, but all the more reason for concentration. So the mind will always tempt you to stray away from what you have come for your goals and your objectives. That's the nature of the mind. The mind and senses also do one thing else. Temptation always makes them tell you to leave the straight path and to take your little small paths around. If you have a straight road, the mind will often tell you, why don't you look in here? Why don't you turn right? Why don't you turn left? Why don't you find something else? So if you have a particular goal, there is always temptation for us to move away from it. And the third thing is the nature of the mind and the nature of temptation is that it has the capacity to deceive you. What do we mean by that? This is a statement taken from the Sastras. It tells us what is the definition of temptation. Another word for temptation is Maya. Maya actually means that which is not. It literally means the thing which is not there, we feel as if it is there. And the things that are there, we tend to ignore. Sastras give us a very good definition of what Maya is. It is a powerful brahmachari. Mostly all of you would know what brahmachari means. A brahmachari is a celibate. He's someone who doesn't want to get married. So supposing someone comes and tells you that Maya is like a powerful brahmachari's son drinking water from a mirage, you would have to think about the statement carefully. One, a brahmachari cannot have son. That's why he is a brahmachari. And two, you will never get water from a mirage. That's why it is a mirage. But like that, we live in this world. Why? Because the things which are not really there for us to get, we somehow or another expect that we should get them. Especially in the areas of relationships. When you enter a relationship with someone, be it a friend, a husband, a wife, the tendency for us immediately is to expect the things that are not there. And in trying to expect these things, we become deceived. When we become deceived, it is our expectations that finally kill us. In this world, very often, you find that we make 4 very, very fundamental mistakes. And these mistakes allow us to become tempted, and they allow us to actually move away from our real goal of life. What are the 4 mistakes that our scriptures tell us? Ask yourselves these, ladies and gentlemen. Ask yourself whether you have come across these 4 mistakes in your life or in other people's lives. The first mistake that our scriptures tell us say that all living entities make, regardless of who they are, regardless of which area, which position they belong in this world. The first is everybody commits mistakes. Yet the irony in this world is we all expect the person next to us not to commit mistakes. When someone makes a mistake in his life, very often we are not very forgiving. Yet when we make mistakes in life, we expect the whole world to understand and to forgive. So the first fundamental problem in this world is that we are always full of mistakes. And yet, we expect everything to be perfect. And that is why we become frustrated. And that is how we become deceived. Second mistake, or rather second defect, is that we all become disillusioned. We are all in a state of being illusioned. Illusion simply means we actually think and behave in a manner that seems to mean that we will live forever. In the Mahabharata, Yudhishthira Maharaj is asked this question. He's asked this very famous question. What is the most wonderful thing in this world? All of you may have heard of this. Some of you may have heard of this. But sometimes you may have asked yourself this question. What is the most wonderful thing in the world? And Yudhishthira Maharaj very nicely replies that the most wonderful thing in this world is that every day, everyone is dying. Someone somewhere is dying. Yet those who live actually believe that they will live forever. That is the state of our lives. We actually believe when someone dies. We go to their funerals, we talk to them, we express our condolences, but very seldom do we leave actually thinking, you know what, it could be my turn. We don't think that. It never strikes us. At the bottom of our hearts, we always believe tragedy can strike other people, but it will not strike me. It can't happen to me. You know, I'll have this luck with me, I'll have this fortune with me. But we don't realize in doing so, we are illusioned. The third mistake, or the third defect in this world, is that everybody has a cheating propensity. In other words, even if we don't know something, we will behave as if we know everything. Very often in this world, even if we can try and give an impression to someone that isn't true, we have a chance to do it. The Shastras tell that to us in a slightly more crude way. They say that if a man comes across $1 on the street and if no one is looking, he'll pick it up and put it in his pocket. Of course, if someone else is looking, then he'll be more civic-minded and return it to the owner of someone else. Because in everyone, there's always the propensity to try and cheat, to get away with it. But we don't realize by doing that, we are actually being deceived. The fourth defect that Shastras tell all of us, that all of us actually possess, is actually that we all have imperfect senses. If I were to off these lights today, none of you can actually see very well. But the amazing thing in this world is we are always saying that if we don't see something, we cannot believe in it. And therefore, in that way, very often we say, I cannot see the Supreme Being, therefore I can't believe him, or believe in his existence. But if you were to off the lights, you will realize how imperfect your very material eyes are. We all need help because all our senses are not perfect. If only we could accept the 4 defects of life, then the temptations of the world will not deceive us. But very often, we do not accept them. So this is the starting point, that there are 4 defects to a living entity. And because there are 4 defects to all of us, our journey in life is mistaken. We actually begin a journey of life thinking that the objective is what we will achieve. If I were to ask each one of you today, what is your objective in life? What do you want out of life? You will give me the same answers, each and every one of you. Everybody will tell me that I want to be happy in my life. There are only 2 kinds of people the scriptures tell us who will not tell you that they want to be happy in their lives. One is a madman. A madman will never say that he wants to be happy. The other is a dead man. A dead man will never say that he wants to be happy because he's dead. Everyone else who is normal will always say 2 things. I want to be happy, I want to be peaceful, and I want to have that happiness and peace. That's the reason why we go to work. That's the reason why you study. That's the reason why you have children. That's the reason why you earn your money. That's the reason why maybe you're seated here. That's the reason why you go out on a Saturday night. Everyone is looking for the same thing. The only difference is the package. How and in what form this happens. The Shastras tell us that every moment of happiness in this world, which is not connected to the Supreme, which is material, you will have an equal, if not more, moment of sadness. That's the equation that the scriptures tell us. And that's the frustration of our lives. How many of you have sat for exams? I'm sure most of you can agree with me. When you sit for exams, and you have that last day when you finish your examinations, not results, when you finish your exams and you put down your pen, how do you feel? I remember when I had exams and I finished it, I remember feeling completely happy. I didn't care about results, frankly, at that point of time. All I was worried about was, can I finish my paper? And when I finished it, to hell with the results. Let's worry 3 months later. Doesn't matter now. At that moment, the happiness that I feel, I cannot explain. It's completely blissful. And the idea of the next day waking up and knowing you're a free man because there are no exams and you have 2 months, 3 months to relax and enjoy is liberating. It's actually liberating. But when the 3 months are up and you come to realize that there's only 2 days, 3 days before exam results are being announced, that's when most of us start praying very hard. That's when we tend to attend temple services much more. That's when our parents wake up and find out, what happened to my son and daughter? They've become very pious. That's when we make all kinds of deals with the good Lord. I remember when I took my O-levels and when I did quite well in it, my father comes up to me and tells me, my dear son, I have prayed that you would get good results, and therefore, now that you have got good results, you have to go to a temple and break 100 coconuts. So I asked him, Father, you prayed. Shouldn't you be breaking? I thought that's the deal. But he said, no, in this case I prayed, but you will have to pray. So this is how, when we are in difficulty, we find that the happiness we had for a while is always replaced, maybe not totally by sadness, but definitely by its cousin known as anxiety. Anxiety. Today you feel relaxed. You all look very relaxed actually. You're all smiling, you know. That's very nice. I like it when you smile back at me. But by Sunday night, you may not be so smiling because Monday is coming. Right? The husbands who go to work start thinking about the work. They tell the wives who are staying at home, you don't know what working life is. The wife who's staying at home says, you try staying at home for a day and you see whether you can survive. And like that, we are all anxious and we all pass the anxiety to each other. So the truth of the matter is, whether you accept it or not, a moment of happiness in this world is very often gotten by many moments of anxiety. You work very hard to get that paycheck. For 30 days you work hard and with great amount of concentration. When you get the paycheck, in 2 days it's almost completely finished. You've got the bills to pay, you are living in Singapore, and apart from everything else, once the festival seasons come, once you have all your maintenance charges and everything, you find there's not much left. That check that you received made you happy for a while, but that's about it. And yet we are running after that happiness because it is our right. But this is the deception of the material world. In a nutshell, the Shastras tell us that the real deception begins by tempting ourselves to run after the happiness which does not last. If the body that you have cannot last because you have to die, what makes us think the happiness that we get will last? And in the same breath, the good news is, if you are in a miserable condition now, I've got good news for you. Thank God that your body is temporary. And because it's temporary, your miseries also have to end with the body. Is this what we want now? I remember when I was very young, I kept looking at everyone who was happy. Then I looked at the same person again and I found that they were anxious or they were sad. And I kept asking myself, there must be a place in this world, there must be a state of thinking or being in this world where you can actually get a more permanent state of happiness. A permanent state of what we call peace and bliss. And that is found in the sastras. So the mistaken journey of life is that for a fraction of a moment of happiness, we go through so much of misery. In the sastras, they have a wonderful story. There was a man who was living in a village and he wanted to cross over into a jungle because he heard that there was a lot of honey found on a beehive, right up in a tree, deep in a forest, which was full of wild animals. Everybody told the man, please don't go in the forest. Why? There are wild animals. We heard that there are supernatural beings. And we also heard that there is a pit somewhere near the tree and you may fall into it. But the man ignored all that because he wanted that drop of honey. That's what he wanted. So he climbs over that wall and he enters the forest. And within no time, what happens? He finds himself chased by wild animals. He runs away from the side where he was and he goes to the other side. And when he goes to the other side, what does he find? He finds these supernatural beings, ghosts, goblins, they are chasing him. So now he runs away from them, but he's running towards the objective of his life, and that's honey. He finally runs towards that huge tree, and he sees the honey at the top. But by looking up, he forgets to look down. And he falls into this pit, which looks bottomless. Just as he's about to hit the bottom of the pit, he finds that he's dangling upside down, because his feet have got stuck in the roots of the tree which have come out from the ground. He's relieved. But when he looks down, he sees two large eyes and he realizes, oh my God, there's a serpent in the pit. It's just waiting for me to fall. And because he had disturbed the tree by his feet touching the roots, the bees that are up in the hive, they have become disturbed. Anyone been stung by bees before? Painful process. Yes, I'm with you there. I felt it before. So the man gets stung on his face by bees. He looks on this side and the animals are waiting outside, waiting for him to come. He looks on this side and there are these supernatural beings and they are waiting for him to come out. He looks down and the serpent is very happy, just waiting for him to fall. But he thinks, I will be secure, until he looks up at his feet and he realizes that there are rats gnawing away at the roots, which means it's only a matter of time before he falls into the pit. But sastras tell us that this man was smiling and he was happy. He was in the most precarious of situations, but he was happy. Why? Because he realized being upside down in such a terrible position, he was actually directly under the beehive. And because the bees had been disturbed, some honey was beginning to drop. And the man realized that when he was upside down, if he could just stick out his tongue, he could actually get a drop of honey coming down and he could taste it. So one by one, slow drops, and he felt quite happy. And he felt, it's alright, I'm alright. Sastras tell us that is our position. We are in such a precarious position. Many things are out of our hands, out of our reach. There's danger at every step, anxiety at every step. But we think that we deserve a fraction of our happiness, and that's enough. But Bhagavad Gita tells us that you can get much more, provided you don't take the mistaken journey of life. So what does the Gita tell us? This is a beautiful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. It pretty much sums up how we become deceived by this human body. The body that we find so precious is the very body that can deceive us. The verse is nice to sing. Dehendriya prana manodiyamyo janmapyaya shuddhayatal shakriche samsara dharme avimuya Yamanaha Smritya Hare Bhagavata Pradhana. The translation is very important. Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, and he says, within this material world, one's material body is always subject to birth and death. The life air, the life force that keeps his body alive is always harassed by hunger and thirst. If you sit here long enough, you will start thinking, when is he going to stop talking? And when are we going to have some nice prasad? Prasad is outside, but that's a good feeling if you are hungry, that's fine. But you realize that every day we are just between hunger, thirst, and thirst. The second point that Bhagavatam tells us, the mind, the nature of the mind is always to be anxious. Always to be anxious. Even if the mind has no problems for a day, the mind will make sure it finds some problems. And it will tell you after a while how to create a problem. Have you ever been in a situation where there was, factually speaking, no problems at all? You know, someone you know, whom you're good friends with, he sees you every day and he says hello at the university. The next day he walks past you, he doesn't say hello, and you start thinking, why didn't he say hello to me? And then after that you think, maybe he doesn't like me, maybe I said something wrong. Maybe tomorrow when I see him, I'll just reciprocate by also not saying hello. The next day, that friend of yours who had something else in his mind and forgot to say hello to you, decides to say hello to you the next day, but you have decided, I will not say hello to him. So when he passes by you, you don't say hello, he says hello. And then you go back and he goes back thinking, why did he not say hello to me today? And then he decides, tomorrow maybe I should also not say hello. If that's the way people want to live, that's the way I will be. And tomorrow we both look at each other and we don't even look at each other. We just look here and there and we just ignore each other. Nothing happened. But this is how the mind creates that which is wrong. That which is wrong. The last point Bhagavatam tells us, if the mind is always anxious, the intelligence has a very nice function. Your intelligence, Bhagavatam tells us, hankers for that which cannot be obtained. We will always run after something for perfection. And when we don't get it, the mind becomes anxious. Intelligence gives you all the favorable arguments. I have come in for today's program. I am expecting A, B, C, D, E. I do not get C, D, E. Therefore, I don't like what I'm hearing. I don't like what I should be hearing. The mind's nature is to find fault. The intelligence nature is to give you an expectation you cannot reach. And when you have mind, intelligence, and when you have the body that is subjecting you to struggle, the entire package is a big struggle. By the end of your life, by the time you reach old age, Bhagavatam tells us that your senses become so exhausted that you really feel old. Is there a way to stop this deception? Yes. While we present to you the problems, we also want you to know the solution. The solution, all our scriptures tell us, is very simple. We should not become bewildered and tempted by other goals in life. If we do, we forget the real goal. One who is constantly trying to remember the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Even while he performs all his duties, he becomes peaceful. That's the verdict of the scriptures. What makes us unfulfilled and frustrated in this world? That's the next question we should ask ourselves. Bhagavad Gita tells us the nature of the mind is the reason why you and I are always anxious or unfulfilled. That's the reason why we become frustrated. Krishna says to Arjuna in the sixth chapter of Bhagavad Gita that the mind's nature is known as chanchal. Chanchal literally means not to keep still, to be always moving up and down, up and down. You realize that children have very little short attention spans because their mind is very chanchal at the point when they're young. Now let's not speak about children, let's speak about adults. If we sit down for too long, you'll find that the mind starts getting restless. It will then tell you to switch off. Intelligence will give you the favorable reasons why you should switch off. And after a while, you now look around for something else to entertain yourself. And this is how the mind takes you from one station to the other. The mind is restless, it is very stubborn, and it is very strong. And the nature of the material intelligence is to influence the mind, to use reasoning and logic and tell yourself why you should feel anxious, why you should feel worried, why you should be doing this, why you should not be doing that. That is the nature of intelligence, and that is the reason for all the frustration that we feel. Before I go to the other slide, I wanted to share with you this point that our sastras say. Whenever you are undergoing any form of temptation in this world that takes you away from true peace, you'll find that temptation has 6 cousins. Sometimes they're called attendants, sometimes cousins, sometimes brothers, but they're always related. They're always related. When we want something, we like something, our senses look at something, and the mind tells the senses, go and get it. That is the meaning of lust. When we see something, we want it. When we see someone having something more than us, it is natural for us to want it. When that happens, Bhagavad Gita tells us we develop lust. Lust simply means a great desire to possess something. Very often you will find in your life that what you want is not always what you want to achieve or can achieve. And when that happens, what happens? You become angry and frustrated. Because you cannot get something, you're frustrated. Or you find the favorable arguments to denounce that particular object. Like the sour grapes and the fox. You remember? The fox, wanted to get the bunch of grapes. It was very nice and very sweet. But when he tried to get the grapes and couldn't get it, what did he say? Actually, you know what? The grapes are all sour. Why should I waste my time trying to get it? So in trying not to get the grapes, we condemn. Or we get frustrated, or we get angry, or we dismiss. These are all different manifestations of anger. So where there is lust, it will be unfulfilled. There will be anger and frustration. But because we still want the object, we are still greedy for it. And because we can't get it, we fall under illusion. And when we're in illusion, we really think that this is good for us when it doesn't bring us permanent happiness. What happens then? From illusion, we become very proud. Proud because we can't admit that we have made a mistake. We cannot even admit to our own conscience that maybe this is not the way to become happy. It's very hard for us to admit to ourselves, let alone others, that the way I've lived my life can be better. Maybe I should be looking for something more permanent, more peaceful. And where there is pride, the result of all this is that because we are unfulfilled, we become envious. If we were not in such a gathering, if this whole gathering of us were a wedding function, for example, you will never be seated so peaceful. First of all, you'll have to talk to each other. Second, you'll all look at each other's clothes. You look at what each other is wearing. Thirdly, you will never dress like this. I'm not saying you're not dressed well, but you won't dress like this for a wedding. And once you put on all your jewelry and all your saris and all your clothes, then each one of you will start comparing yourself to each other. And in doing so, you will go back always thinking, why didn't I get this sari? Why didn't I get that car? Why did this person not talk to me? Why did that person not talk to me? And that's what happens to us in every event. But because today you are seated here, hearing from the Gita, whether you like it or not, whether you realize it or not, your mind and your intelligence is a little bit calmer. Why? There's no envy where there is any contact with the Supreme. These are deities of their Lordship, Sri Sri Radha Mother. They may look like idols, but they are deities. They are the form representation of the Supreme Lord. And unknown to us, just by their presence, there is a transcendental vibration where they speak. This is the difference between material happiness and spiritual happiness. So the 6 attendants of temptation are very powerful. But even though they are very powerful, they can be conquered. There is only one way. And now we come to that point. There is a story in Bhagavatam, which I'm going to share with you, which is very, very instructive. By the end of the story, I think you will find many things about this ancient history that you can identify. But before I go into this, I want to tell you one very interesting story about Alexander the Great. You all know Alexander the Great, no introductions needed. If you read through some of the historical texts on his conquering of the different parts of the known world at that time, you'll realize that Alexander did something no conqueror could do. He conquered what was mostly the known world, and he did extend his territories very, very far. At the end of it, you also know, historically speaking, that Alexander actually did not live long to enjoy this wonderful kingdom that he conquered. He conquered the whole world, but disease finally conquered him. He conquered everything. He had the most riches in the world, but in the end, he could not stay long enough to enjoy them. At the point when he was going to leave this world, there are tales from Greek mythology. There are also references in Indian texts which suggest that Alexander actually spoke to his advisors, and he told them this very interesting thing before his passing. He laid out a request for his advisors that they should do and follow after he left this world. He said, after I've left this world, after I've died, I want you to do 3 things for me. The first that you must do is put me in a coffin and bring me out befitting a king into the streets. Let everyone see. But keep your coffin open, and I want the best physicians who treated me to carry the coffin, to become my pallbearers. Second, I want you to leave the palms of my hands out of the coffin, so that the world can see that I have nothing in my hands. And the third, I want whatever gold coins that I've amassed all over the world, I want them strewn on the streets for my journey, my final journey that I'm going to take. So the advisors asked him famously, why all these unusual requests? Why? And Alexander replied very nicely. He said, I want my pallbearers to be my physicians, because I realize that despite the best of physicians that a king or an emperor can command, if it is time for me to leave, nothing can stop them. Second, I want my hands to be out with my palms open, because I have realized that despite all the wealth I've accomplished and I've accumulated, I will not be able to carry a single coin or a single note with me as I pass over. Anybody here born with clothes? Anybody think you're going to be born next life with your MAs and your PhDs and your LLBs? Not likely. Haven't heard of a baby like that. Haven't heard of a baby who comes out with ready-made Pampers? All babies come out either quiet or crying. If they are not crying, the doctor gives them 2 tight slaps and they start crying. And when they start crying, we are all laughing. Because we are so happy that they are crying, because it means that they are alive. And the poor baby, our sastras tell us, is crying because, man, I've taken birth again. And we don't realize that. We come into this world with nothing. We come into this world crying. Midway through the world, we also cry. And very often, by the end of the world, or by the end of our life in the world, we are also not smiling. Alexander realized that. And the last point is very interesting. This is the one I like personally. He said that you please do one thing. Leave all the coins on the streets. And they said, why? He said, because, well, I realize I'm not going to keep them. I might as well just give it all to everyone. And then he laughed and he said, but the beauty is, everyone who picks up the coin will think that he will keep this coin forever. And by doing so, he will just perpetuate my mistake. The mistake that we are taking a journey that is completely free of deception and confusion. Now, let us start the ancient history of this great king known as Puranjana. Right? Puranjana, Bhagavatam tells us, was a very great and powerful king. He was known to be so powerful, but he was also known to have one friend. His friend was known as Avignata. Avignata in Sanskrit means the unknown one. Okay? So, the story goes that this Avignata followed Puranjana wherever he went. And Puranjana was traveling from country to country, because he had unlimited desires for sense enjoyment. And every time he finished with one sense enjoyment, he needed to go to another place. You realize if you watch one movie, you can't watch it 100 times. You tear your hair, whatever's on your head, away. You can't take it. If I were to tell you today, all of you, to chant Coca-Cola, 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 and make that your mantra, right? You'll get very upset with me. Why? Chanting Coca-Cola is not going to quench your thirst. If you did, Coca-Cola would run out of business. So, what I'm trying to tell you is, Puranjana had to move from place to place because whatever he enjoyed, he could not enjoy again. He had to go someplace else. So he moved with his friend, moving around the world, looking for a place where his desires could be fulfilled. But everywhere he went, the story goes, he could not find a place to his liking. And he became morose, he became disappointed. One day, he came across a beautiful city. What was unique about the city was that it was a city of the 9 gates. It had 9 gates. And every time you open a gate, going in and out of the city would open up into another beautiful city where you could have wonderful enjoyment. Like that, there were 9 wonderful gates, and there was a wonderful city. Bhagavatam tells us the description of the city was very nice. It was very peaceful. It was surrounded by beautiful walls, parks, gardens. There were reservoirs. There were non-violent animals. It was the perfect place for Puranjana to settle down and enjoy. So Puranjana then decided, this looks to be a very nice place to stay. So what does he do? While he's moving around in the city, looking, seeing if there's anyone there, he then suddenly looks around and he comes in contact with a very beautiful woman. There she is. She looks beautiful, I think. But there's something about her that also looks a bit cunning. By the way, I didn't do the slides, so I'm looking at them as you are looking at them too. Puranjana comes in contact with a beautiful maiden, but she is not an ordinary person. Why? Besides possessing exquisite beauty, she seems to have an entire entourage behind her. What was interesting is, she appeared to be walking around without engagement. You know what that means? It means you're walking around looking lost in your own city. So Puranjana looks. He observes that behind the lady, there appears to be a chief servant, very powerful, very strong. Behind this servant, there are 10 strong male servants. And behind each of these male servants, there appear to be hundreds of wives who accompany each of them. Can you imagine the size of this entire assembly? And right at the back, where the time is, you find that Puranjana saw a huge serpent, but it had 5 hoods, and it looked like it was protecting the entire retinue. So Puranjana comes across this wonderful maiden, and what does he do? Naturally, he becomes attracted to her. In those days, if a man was attracted to a lady, and vice versa, they were quite straightforward to make their feelings known. They did not move around, they did not move indirectly, so Puranjana was very direct. He looks at her, captivated, and then he addresses that, my dear maiden, where have you come from? Who are you? What are you doing here? Who are these people? You look very beautiful. I'm very attracted to your beauty. Will you marry me? Very fast. The maiden is also very attracted to Puranjana because Puranjana looks like a very handsome and very powerful king. So when he inquired who she was, who the personalities behind her were, the maiden replies very interestingly. She says, "Oh, best among human beings, I do not know who has begotten me." She doesn't know where she's come from. "I cannot speak to you perfectly about this, nor do I know where we have all come from. I have no idea about my origins. We only know that we have been existing in this place. That's all." Now this is very mysterious. She says, all these men behind, all my friends, they are all my servants and they're all my acquaintances and companions. And you see that snake there, sir? That snake is always protecting this entire city. Doesn't sleep. 24/7 is always awake, taking care of the city. Now she says, "My dear king, you appear to be very handsome. You're very heroic. You have all the makings of a great hero. Somehow or another now you have come to this city. I can see you have a great desire to enjoy and satisfy your senses. And I'm also very attracted to you. If you were to enjoy the city with me, I am sure my friends and my companions will try our best in all respects to fulfill all your desires. Please, I request you, live here for 100 years. I have arranged the city beautifully with 9 gates so that you can enjoy forever. Very tempting. Very tempting. Puranjana decides, why not? Why not? Completely enamored, the king looks at the queen looks at the king, and they have fallen in love. They are supporting each other, Bhagavatam says, through mutual understanding. And they enter the city of 9 gates. And as you can see from all the pictures there, I don't know whether they had these things millions of years ago, but it gives you an idea of how wonderful life was for them. So Puranjana enjoyed his life with his queen. Professional singers sang the glories of Puranjana. We all love glories of ourselves to be sung, isn't it? That's true. If someone were to introduce me very nicely, I have an incentive to stand up and speak to all of you. If someone doesn't introduce me very nicely, I can feel very slighted. In this world, praise is a wonderful thing. And when someone who is professional and paid to glorify you keeps singing your glories, and if you're foolish enough to believe that that is actually true, as Puranjana felt, then I guess you would be happy. So Puranjana every day had a different pastime. What did he do? Every day he entered 1 gate. All this time, mind you, his friend Avijñata was with him. Avijñata was a well-wisher. He was known as unknown because Puranjana just considered him as a friend but of no value. Because he never taught him how to enjoy in this material world. Have you had friends who are actually your well-wishers, but because they're not attractive in some form or another in this material world, you tend to ignore them. You tend to put them on the back burner, so to speak. You tend to be attracted to things which are more attractive immediately. But sometimes true friends are friends who will stand by you when things get really difficult. So at this moment, Puranjana had no value for Avijñata. But Avijñata followed him wherever he go, looking out for him, witnessing his activities. Puranjana just didn't care. Sometimes he would go to the 9 gates and enjoy. Sometimes he would go to the private home. And when he went to the private home, what would he do? He would just sit down there with his chief servants. And at that time, he would experience satisfaction and happiness. Why? Because he would be seated with his wife and his children. So having so much nice enjoyment, Puranjana gradually became implicated in what we call different types of mental options. He engaged in different kinds of fruitive activities. And in that way, Puranjana became completely under the control of intelligence, material, and he became cheated. He forgot that all of this will only be for 100 years. That's the part he didn't hear. He just heard the part where, let's enjoy. But he thought 100 years is a long time. We'll cross the bridge when we come to it. Isn't that what we always say? Puranjana said the same thing. Puranjana became so attached to his wife. When she stood up to drink, he would drink. When she sat down to dine, he would dine. When she chewed something, he would chew it. When she sang, he would sing. If she was happy, he was happy. If she was sad, he was sad. If she walked, he walked behind her. And in that way, Puranjana lived his life. When you're very close with somebody, you find that that's how the nature of the relationship is. You tend to replicate each other. And each person thinks, I'm bringing that person happiness. But we don't realize that both of us are in the net, and we will never be freed from it. Like that, 100 years passed, and because of his great attraction for her, when she was happy, his happiness was there. But if she was upset, he became upset. This is the difference between happiness and bliss. Bhagavatam gives us a very nice definition of happiness and bliss. Happiness is that state of being where your happiness is actually dependent on an external person or object. You want to go and watch a movie, but you want to watch it with your best friend. Last minute, when you're waiting there at the movies, your best friend calls and cancels. Half the fun is gone, isn't it? In fact, even though the movie may be good, the kick was to sit and see it with your best friend. is how our happiness is. So when we become attached to the objects of our happiness, you'll find if that object doesn't make us happy, we will fall with that object. Bliss has a different definition. Bliss says happiness that is not dependent on an external, temporary circumstance or object, but that happiness which is dependent on something which is eternal. That will give you permanent happiness. Puranjana did not get permanent happiness, but he was happy anyway. And in doing so, he forgot that time was passing. Days were